Hey everybody, it's Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am very, very excited to have with me this evening my friend and colleague Corey Singleton. Corey has over 25 years of experience advocating for information and communications technology, ICT, accessibility, and the use of assistive technology by individuals with disabilities at home, in the workplace, and in the classroom. For the last 14 years, he has worked as the Assistive Technology Initiative, ATI, manager for George Mason University, GMU. Let's go with all the initials. The ATI operates under Mason's Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and is tasked with developing, guiding, and implementing a university-wide strategy for the ICT accessibility needs of students, staff, faculty, and visitors with disabilities. He also teaches a course on web accessibility and design in the College of Education and Human Development's Learning Design and Technology program. Woo, that is a very impressive resume, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you tonight?
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I know it's a mouthful. I apologize. Yeah.
Not at all. I think it's really impressive, and it just talks about, it speaks to how much experience you have and how knowledgeable you are. So I want to make sure everybody knows. If you are watching, please put your comments in here and I will get to them. Corey is here to answer your questions, but I have up, and of course, there we go. Let me turn that all the way off. Let me just see. Yep. Okay. So please join us. Bring him your questions. That's what he's here for. And hopefully we will be able to manage all of those. So Corey, we're 3/4 of the way through the year. And are you still seeing students who have never come and asked you guys for assistive technology?
Yeah, that's a common thing. Most of the students actually we meet with are coming to us to use assistive technology for the first time, or if they did use it at all in high school. I mean, whether it be in high school or coming from a 2-year institution like Northern Virginia Community College, for example, is a feeder school for us. Um, they're not as familiar with what their needs are, and so for
Oh,
that reason, they're kind of coming to us. It's a fresh slate and we're kind of starting from scratch in many cases. It's and unfortunately, more times than not, the students are coming without an understanding of what specifically these tools will do for them. They just kind of generally say, I need something to help me with reading, or I need something to help me with note taking, but they don't necessarily have any idea what tools are out there, or what resources out there that best support them. And so oftentimes at that time, you're kind of picking their brain to kind of figure out what things are you doing right now, what's working for you right now, and then you can kind of figure out what tools to offer as a potential solution for them going forward.
so there are types of assistive technology for all manner of academic tasks. Could
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about the categories? Like, so whether it's categories of technology, or if you want to narrow it or discuss it by like setting. So in the classroom, testing technology, homework
hmm
related technology.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The easiest way to categorize it, I will say, is in type of assistive technology. Because what someone uses in the classroom is oftentimes what they will use when they're studying or when they're taking a test. So the common tools that we work with in higher ed, or at least I'll say at George Mason University, um, are text to speech tools. So things
Mm,
that will oftentimes read electronic documents for students. So if they have an electronic textbook or electronic version of their textbook, or they get Word documents, syllabi, something like that, then usually they need some kind of text to speech tool to help them with reading. Another tool that's not as common, but we do get questions about it from time to time, are voice recognition solutions.
mm.
So, what can I use to help me with writing? Sometimes the voice recognition solution may be something to help them with note taking as well. Oftentimes, we may see students who struggle with, they got those thoughts up in their head, but they struggle with getting them down on paper. And so, using the voice recognition tool allows them to get those things out without having to worry about, kind of hunting and pecking on a keyboard or typing or having to think too much about what they need to do. The other set of tools I would say we work with are note-taking solutions. Oftentimes we are dealing more with audio note-taking solutions. So they're kind of they kind of fall into two areas when you think about note-taking. So one would be audio note-taking, meaning that the student is basically recording the lecture, and the lecture is in one way or another being transcribed, or the student may be interacting with the tool where they can kind of highlight specific things. Like there's a tool we work with called Glean, and Glean allows you to record the audio. And then what you can do is use kind of a set of emojis to kind of highlight important things. And so, that's important. So I'm going to put a little icon down at that little, I'm basically placing a marker in the audio and then writing myself a little note so I can go back to it. You're able to kind of create these little highlights or markers throughout the audio file.
Wow.
Glean added a new feature which allows you to transcribe the audio as well. And so
Wow.
then they can kind of copy and paste pieces from that transcription and place those in those little note-taking markers if they want as well. You had a question, I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, just for those who are watching, for whom some of this might be new, just be aware, a college's responsibility is to provide students, for instance, with the text that they need in an accessible format, so it
Mhm.
can be read by text-to-speech software. The student themselves may have to get their own copy of a program. The accommodation is the text in the alt format. Now, Corey, at GMU, do you guys have a site license? Are you able to give them, students who are found eligible, access to the text to speech?
Yeah, so we purchase a number of different technologies that we kind of make available to the students. So, for example, with Glean, we have 100 seats that
Hmm.
we offer, and there a lot of tools now are cloud-based, meaning that
Hmm.
someone can use it, and if we find we're able to kind of manage it all in the cloud as well, so you can see when someone last logged into the tool and used it.
Wow.
So, if we give it to someone and we notice after a while they're not using it, we can reach out to them and say, "Hey, are you still using it?" If they say no, we can pull that license out back and actually assign it to someone else. So a lot of solutions are moving in that direction, which make it much easier for institutions to kind of keep tabs on what licenses are out there. And it also makes it a little easier for you to provide that level of support. I know at our institution, what's nice, or at least in my office, we don't we don't typically buy a specific tool for a specific student. So just
That's
like a
important
student,
for
you know
folks
what I
to
mean?
know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if a student shows up at, I'll use the example. I used to work with the Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired here in Northern Virginia, and when the client came to meet with us, we called them customers at the time, but when the customers came to meet with us and we kind of learned about what their needs were, we bought the tools specifically kind of to meet their individual needs. In higher ed, you don't typically operate that way. The student may come and have specific needs, but what we do is look at what tools do we have that we can marry with your specific needs. It may not be the exact tool that you used
Hmm.
when you were in
Hmm.
high school, may not be the exact tool that you actually want, but we don't typically buy a license for only that student. Now, the
Right.
reason we do that, and I'll use the most extreme example that's out there, again, going back to kind of blind and low vision, there were years ago when I first started, even prior to when I started, there was a student who's totally blind who needed a refreshable braille display. At that time, refreshable braille displays could easily cost upwards of $10,000.
Wow.
So you purchase that device for that specific student. Student uses it, or they could graduate, and then you now have a $10,000 device that you got to wait years before the next student comes along to take advantage of it. Or you could purchase that for them, and then they decide the next semester, I'm not going to enroll and take classes anymore for a while. So now you have this nice $10,000 piece of equipment that is gone unused, is now becoming obsolete, and you can't do anything with it. So in most instances, what you will find is institutions will probably try to buy tools or solutions, which may be in annual licenses now, or things that will stay fairly up to date. It's
Hmm.
easy for them to take that license and then give it to someone else for them to use as well. Or it may have multiple uses, like Read and Write Gold. Read and Write, call it Read and Write Gold, but it's called Read
Right.
and
We
Write
call it
now.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, Read and Write has Well, they kind of take advantage of the text-to-speech capability that's built into the operating system. I kind of call it a jack of all trades, master of none in some ways. So it does some things really, really well. Some other things, the feature is there, but it may not necessarily be the best tool for that particular solution. And so what a lot of institutions will do is buy tools like that, which can be used by a number of different individuals, depending on what their functional needs are. And so that makes it a little easier for you to kind of spread the resources around and provide as much support as possible.
And be aware for folks that are watching, if you as a family want to buy a different program like Kurzweil, for instance, rather than Read 'em Write Gold, your student can have it loaded on their own computer and use it, because again, the accommodation at GMU, if your student is eligible, is to get the texts in the format that Kurzweil or Read 'em Write Gold would need.
Mhm.
But your student can choose to use the software that they're already accustomed to.
Exactly.
So for those who are going to read my book, which I'll show you at the end, in the laws specifically, it talks about when there are certain kinds of auxiliary aids that we have to provide, but we don't have to provide personal devices at the college level. And so that software is generally interpreted to fall under the category of personalized devices. So Corey, we got questions coming in. All right, number one, let's see. What is your knowledge of pen readers for helping read college textbooks? Do folks use those at all?
That's a great question. Short answer is no.
Mhm.
So years ago, we purchased a number of them for students to be able to use. We might have had one. I mean, I'm right up on 15 years now at GMU, and
Mhm.
we might have had one student in that entire time actually use a pen reader, and that's because they used the pen reader in another setting. And
Mhm.
so for that reason, they were comfortable with them. They knew what to do with them. Um, and and it was a fairly easy tool for them to kind of pick up and start using again. Most of the other students, when you present them with a pen reader or present them with um, something that's going to read the entire document per se. So instead of having to scan every line like a lot of pen readers do, you got to scan every line. It kind of captures the information and reads it back to the individual. With an electronic document, I can just have the document up on the screen or on my tablet or on my phone, and that text to speech tool can just read it. And I
Mhm.
don't necessarily have to physically engage in the process of actually scanning every line of text. Now, for some students, that that tactile engagement actually may help them with learning, but obviously it's been a rare occurrence on our campus.
Right. So for the parent who asked about that, I'm going to type into the chat. Brian Friedlander is a professor of assistive technology also. And if you find him on Facebook, he has a couple of posts on reading pens. But again, remember that Corey's speaking from his experience. I work at a college. I don't know that we are loaning those out. Again, the pen itself would be the personal device. If your student has one and uses it, they're welcome to do that. We're not going to stop them. But it's not the kind of thing that even in our professional community online, I don't hear anybody really talking about that. They're much more frequently talking about accommodating students if they do this with the use of text-to-speech software.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Next question. What is the best way to get to know what your student needs in the way of assistive technology? That's a tough one.
That is a tough one, and it really depends on the student. So a lot of it, when we do an assessment, we're asking a lot of probing questions. We're talking specifically about what things are they currently doing, what things are you hoping to achieve through the process as well, and then it's a lot of trial and error. You hope to try them with different tools. Oftentimes, we start with the simplest solution
Mhm.
or the thing that's most that is easiest to access. So for example, if we're talking text to speech, we may start with what's built into the operating system, or we may start with what's built into the application. So for example, if you're thinking Microsoft 365, you kind of take advantage of the reading solution that's built into that. And once you go from immersive reader and find out if immersive reader works, and you start to look at some of those features. If that's not good enough, then you move up and kind of go in a graduated
So
direction.
right, so it's like
Yeah.
tiers
Like
of,
tiers, yeah. You
yeah,
move in
yeah. Oh,
tiers,
how interesting.
and that
Yeah.
makes it a little easier so that you don't go to the most complex solution, which may be difficult for them to learn or just difficult for them, excuse me, to access for some reason. You start on the lower end, and then you kind of move up to see what best meet their needs. And that, when you start there and kind of move through that process, the student will then give you a lot of feedback as to what works, what might work. Oh, I can do this might work with XYZ, and have them pull up their own documents and resources so that they're doing it with the tools that they would use, or with the documents or resources that they would engage with in the evening, in the library, in the classroom. And that makes it a little easier for them to kind of see themselves using that specific tool in that situation as well.
That was one of my favorite things that you talked about when I interviewed you for the book, is how many tools are built into the computers and the phones that your students are
Mhm.
already carrying around and just perhaps don't think about, or maybe don't know are there. Is there a good place, with these operating systems to find out, what's basically between PCs and Macs? How
Mhm.
how can they best find out the accessibility tools that are in there?
If you do a search for Microsoft accessibility and you do a search for Apple accessibility, you will find a host of information. They do an excellent job of pooling together all of their resources and talking about all of the different accessibility features that are in the operating systems. And there are a lot of videos on and training resources out there, training materials that are out there on those specific features as well. So I would start there, because uh, those two companies are very invested in accessibility, not only in terms of staffing, but in terms of the resources and training that they make available and tools that they provide.
And I think, YouTube is a great resource for
Mhm.
students. And I think too, when we talk about this stuff, so often students don't want to feel different than their classmates. And so
Yeah,
one of the great benefits of using the stuff that's built into the tools that everybody has is it doesn't make them feel like they stand out.
very
It's
true.
just there. And I think to emphasize to them too, this stuff is here and it's so easy. And it's not, even though it comes under accessibility when you look it up to find out what's there, these are just the everyday tools.
Hmm.
Everybody's using them.
Hmm.
Everybody's dictating, let's see. Oh, this is a very interesting question. Somebody's student has selective mutism and cannot speak to other students or teachers. Have you worked with a student like this, and what kind of technology has been useful for a student like with this situation?
No, that's actually a very interesting. I'd have to do some research on that one and explore. No, I'm probing my head back
Mhm.
years, and I cannot think of a situation where I've ever been in that situation.
I wonder if that's an opportunity for a student, to raise their hand and type an answer
Yeah.
into, so what would read it aloud? I'm blanking now. So if I had my phone handy and I
Hmm.
typed a note, would the,
Yeah. I
like, in
mean,
an iPhone, would the note be
yeah.
read aloud?
There are a lot of things you can do to have it read aloud. The the
Yeah,
the challenge is how many tools, how many different applications do you want talking to one another in order to just get the output, if that makes
right.
sense. You don't want to introduce too many things so that it becomes a little too difficult to kind of communicate. Um,
Mhm.
and there may be instances, we've had instances where folks are participating in the class but also signed into a live session, um, where you might communicate through chat in that live session,
Oh,
so that,
interesting.
you know what I
Whoa.
mean. So like I'm in
Okay.
class, I'm physically in class, but Zoom is also signed on as well,
Yeah.
so that you can kind of chat or send messages that way. Or it may be, we've had situations where that has been necessary,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, there are a lot of tools I'm sure out there that we can find that where if you type a message, it will read it aloud. Yeah, we can figure out something
Hmm.
like that. But I'd
Uh,
have to explore some things. Yeah, I
sure.
have to explore.
As
That's
you
a
said,
very interesting one.
well, if Corey has a chance, he'll if this parent wants to email me here, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat.
Sure.
Um, if this parent wants to contact me, Corey's a busy guy, but if he has chance, he can think about that. And I will also try to ask my professional community and see what they say. All right, what
Well,
about,
there's also, and I'm sorry to cut you off,
no,
Elizabeth,
please, no,
there
no.
are also augmentative communication tools that are out there too. So AAC is a whole nother area of assistive technology where people specialize and deal with alternative augmentative communication devices. And so those devices, yes, you can use those devices for speech output in real time. And that may
Um,
be a situation. It just
mhm.
depends on the student. It depends on your specific student, what they want
In
to do.
your, do you have any experience if a student is in high school and has selective mutism? How might the family get the school to get them connected with that augmentative communication?
I would think starting with the special education resource teachers would be a good place to kind of start with having that conversation. You can also reach out to, um, like here in Virginia, it would be the Department on Aging and Rehabilitative Services. And so working with the DARS counselors to kind of talk about what those needs are in the classroom and how those needs would kind of play out in a vocational environment as well, with helping the student as they transition from school into work or school into higher education or things like that. So those are good places to start with having those conversations.
Okay. So for that parent, yeah, start with your special ed department. That your special ed teacher, case manager probably doesn't have the information, but there should be somebody in the district that that can be contacted. All
Yeah,
right.
that's right. I'm sorry. District level when you think K-12. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know, right? It's hard to switch back and forth. So somebody's asked about any technology for executive function, organization, and time management. I mean, that's not necessarily what you guys do, right?
It is a part of it, but it really depends. Like, so for example, Mason has a program called Massey, which is the Mason Autism Spectrum Initiative. And that is an additional level of support for those students who are on the spectrum. And so we see some of those students, not all of those students, but yeah, there are a number of tools out there to support executive functioning, organization. Just kind of depends. We've done things with um, I'm trying to think. There's one app called Timo or Timo. I can't remember how I pronounce it, but I say
Yeah.
it's like TIIMO, which is a
Okay.
really good tool for kind of you can import your calendar and it kind of, will give you kind of a visual countdown of how much time may have for specific tests and um, or events or activities or whatever, things like that. Glean, the tool I mentioned earlier, has those kind of visual indicators embedded as well to kind of help students who may have some challenges with task management, time management. There are a number of things we might help a student do, but again, it depends on that student.
Yeah.
Every student's individual needs, we evaluate as they come in and try to figure out some different things. Some
Right.
students,
And
it may be as simple, I want a hand count, I want a physical calendar to kind of engage with post-it notes and little markers and things like that. Some want a calendar like that. For others, they want something that they want you to help them kind of organize through an Outlook calendar or a Google calendar or something like that. So it really depends on the student what they're looking for.
right. I'm sorry. I am trying to look up this group, and of course I can't put my fingers on it, but Joan Lipman Green is a colleague who runs a whole group on assistive technology, and I am desperately trying to find her group. Just bear with me because I cannot multitask. Um, I can never, let's see. It never comes up when I want it, does it? I have one more place to look. Hang on just a sec. But to the point about executive function, that's not usually the kind of stuff that an assistive technology specialist at a college is going to be working on with students. That tends to fall. I mean, it's always worth asking. But in my experience, that kind of falls into the things that students are expected to sort of figure out for themselves. Now, the tutoring center on campus might offer something. Disability services itself might have some workshops on getting organized, and they may suggest stuff. There are good lists available in a lot of places. This is not good.
And I'll give you an example too. On our campus,
Yeah.
we have learning support services. And so
Okay.
learning support services partners with disability services, and they provide that level of support for those students in the Massey program as well. So they may work with a learning specialist to kind of help with note taking, with organization, with graphic organizers and things like that.
Right.
We provide the tools to support that. And sometimes we'll work with the students on different types of technology and tools that they may want to explore. So, for example, there was one student, we kind of did a deep dive with Microsoft OneNote to kind of help with
Mm.
organization and note taking and task management in that kind of way. The color coding really helped this particular student with organizing all of their different notebooks as it relates to the different classes that they were taking. So it
And
really, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, please go. Go ahead and
No,
finish.
I was just going to say it depends, but you may find, as Elizabeth was mentioning earlier, that there's a partnership kind of happening between the folks who deal with AT, the disability services counselor, and maybe like a tutoring center, or in our particular case, there's a learning support services center.
Right. What's the name of that program again at GMU?
Massey, Mason
Right. Got
Autism
that one.
Spectrum
And then the
Initiative.
learning services.
It's called Learning Services.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
And is that through the disability services office, or is that just the general tutoring?
No, actually, that's through counseling and psychological services, or
Oh, okay.
CAPS as we call it. But
Okay.
they're a unit within CAPS.
Okay. And what I love about what you just said, again, you're still talking about Microsoft
Mhm.
tools, Microsoft OneNote. So that's all the stuff that's built in. So of course, Facebook has shoveled this, and I did find Joan's group, so it's in the chat. Joan Lippman Green is assistive technology specialist. She has a Facebook group that you can join to learn even more about these tools that we're talking about. All right, let's see. Read and write gone. How we kind of got. This is an interesting question. How do you match which text to speech to use, and do you assist students in its use?
Um. Okay, so I'll talk about what I started on earlier. So one of the things we start off with first when we talk to students about text to speech is we will start with the simplest solution, what's built in, whether they're looking at their mobile device. I'll use the example of kind of moving through someone who's a PC user. So we may start off with Immersive Reader. The next tool we'll look at is called Snap and Read. So you have Immersive Reader, which is built in to obviously Microsoft Edge, so they can access it in the browser. They can access it in Word. They can access it in PowerPoint, those kinds of things. And then if that's not something that works for them, we may look at Snap and Read. Snap and Read is a very simple tool that incorporates a little bit more functionality. So the reading of PDFs, the ability to kind of um, um, essentially capture text and have it kind of scan in real time, the ability to capture notes and actually have those notes integrated into like an online outline tool that can help students as well. The outline also includes some templates to kind of
Mm.
support note taking in a more advanced way if the students need that as well. So that offers some functionality. Simple. It's really easy to use. It is a browser plugin, so it
Oh.
works in Chrome. It also works in Edge. I'm trying to think of
I
this.
didn't know anybody was using Edge.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of the other browser that it might work in. So, but what's nice about Snap and Read, in the limitation with Snap and Read is that it's browser based. So if you have a document that is on your computer, a Word document or whatever, and you're not operating in the browser, that means you need to convert it into a PDF and then upload it in order for you to read it with Snap and Read. All right,
Mhm.
so it has to be a PDF or it has to be a browser based application. The next step up from Snap and Read, for example, would be a tool like Natural Reader. And so Natural Reader, again, is a web-based solution. The difference is Natural Reader can convert a number of different formats: Word documents, um, LibreOffice documents. It can convert PDF documents, PowerPoint documents. So it can convert a number of different formats into a readable format for Natural Reader to take advantage of. It
Mhm.
also includes some more natural sounding voices, whereas Snap and Read includes only voices that are built into the operating system. And so you'll see this kind of a graduated approach with a little more functionality as you move up towards more complex solutions. And that's kind of how we evaluate what works and what doesn't work. For some students, especially if they're new to text to speech, they consider everything they're hearing robotic speech, and it's a little hard for them to adjust. For
Mhm.
those who may have some comfort, they may, I like the robotic speech, that's fine for me, or it enunciates in a certain way, that's fine for me. For example, I have a hearing loss, and so for me, uh, male voices, that bass tends to,
Mm.
I tend to hear that a lot better. Where it's
Interesting.
a little difficult for me with female voices sometimes. And so sometimes that's a nuance that you only find out as you guys start trying out these different solutions and kind of having conversations around what works and what doesn't work. So that's kind of a graduated approach that we'll take. And then the next step will be Read and Write, which goes even further than Natural Reader, and that you can work with documents in the cloud, you can work with documents on the desktop. It supports a number of different formats.
And we had specifically a question about text to speech that's friendly with a Chromebook where they don't have to copy and paste. So does one of those browser-based ones work for that?
That's a good question. We don't often deal with Chromebooks,
Mm.
but I would imagine if it supports, like Chrome Vox is a solution I know that's built into Chromebooks. Um,
VOX.
yeah, Chrome VOX, Chrome Vox. So so you have that, but I would imagine most of the plugins that are supported by the Chrome browser should work on
Mhm.
a Chromebook as well.
And again, folks, be aware that as Corey says, so much of this stuff is already built in, and it takes time too. So, I at one point was trying to use Microsoft Word's dictation feature. I gave up on it a while ago. At the time I was using it, it wasn't very accurate. Um, but there are other ways to do things too. So now sometimes if I have a lot of thoughts and I know my fingers won't be able to keep up, I open a note on my phone and I talk into my phone. And then I can copy that or send the note to myself. So again, there are lots of things that your students may be already using even for other purposes and never thought to put toward their academics.
Hmm.
And Corey, when it comes, Natural Reader has a free version, I know,
Hmm.
but you can upgrade for, I think I just saw the price is about $144 a year.
Right.
And celebrities will read things to you. I saw recently Snoop is available as a voice, and Gwyneth Paltrow. So lots of things to choose from if you're interested, and I know which one I'd choose. Um, so somebody's asked a question I don't think you're going to be able to answer, which is just
Sure.
because they're asking, is Glean the most common software used for note taking?
Um, I'll speak towards Mason and higher ed
That's
at
yeah.
Mason. For those who are coming to us for note taking supports, yes, Glean is the most common. For students who are not comfortable with audio note taking, they're not going to go back and listen to the audio recording later or
Right,
anything like that.
right.
They may prefer to use like one of the smart pens that are out there, like the LiveScribe pens, where it can capture audio and text. The caution with that is that if you take effective handwritten notes already, then the LiveScribe pen is a good alternative.
Right, right.
If you do not take effective handwritten notes, it's not a good solution. The
Mm.
two best ones that we've found or that we've kind of settled on are Glean for those who may prefer audio note taking, LiveScribe pens for those who prefer handwritten notes. Another really good solution is Otter.ai.
Mhm.
Um, Otter.ai is that is actually the speech engine underlying Zoom's transcription. So the
Which
caption to the
you
live
got going right
transcription.
now.
Yes, exactly. And it does a really effective job.
Oh, very good.
If you, I think it used to be, they just changed the pricing. I think it might be about 60 or $70 a year now. It
Mhm.
used to be, you can still get a free account, but the free account is a little bit less. It's 300 minutes as opposed to 600 minutes. Um, but it does a really effective job of transcribing notes. And if you can actually record an audio file and then import it and then have it transcribe the audio file as for you as well. So like Elizabeth was mentioning, if I just want to kind of dictate and get my notes down and just kind of talk to myself and then transcribe it later on, I can do that by importing it into Otter.ai.
Mhm.
And so we have some faculty members who do that when they're actually trying to um, do narrated PowerPoints or narrated lectures or
Wow.
presentations. They'll actually lecture using Otter.ai and then upload the transcript in to PowerPoint once it's transcribed in Otter.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So I would agree with Corey that in my community online, when people are talking about how they're accommodating, those are the two that come up most often is Glean and Otter. I know that some smart pens have been phased out by the company.
Mhm.
Again, smart pens, remember to just being my nerdy self, because this is important. The permission to record is the accommodation that we provide, if that's what we're going to provide.
Mhm.
The device or the software you use is the personal device. Again, that the exception in the law. There are a lot of schools that are providing access to Otter or providing access to Glean, but the actual accommodation is the permission to record. And then if we don't necessarily sorry, let me be clear. It's been a long day. Sorry. We don't have to provide the recording software, the recording device. Students can use their phones.
Mhm.
It's not a good idea for students to record classes without permission, even in states, and this is neither legal nor medical advice, but the lawyers in my group say, even with in some states, you'd have to have two-party permission or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
And I would say it's just a really good idea to always have permission from somebody before recording, which I think kind of gets to a question somebody asked, which is, do accommodations used, you know what, I'm gonna put that one back for now because that's a different kind of question. So somebody's daughter is graduating, she's got ADHD, she has difficulty keeping focused on reading. So, for anybody asking for an accommodation, be aware too that sometimes students might think that they want text to speech, again, for the book to be, or the text to be read aloud to them. Some people find it distracting. Corey, have you had that experience with
Mhm.
students?
Yeah, yeah, and this goes back to why there's an assessment, because you have to have a conversation with the student about what works and what doesn't work. There are some students which you might think, oh, they're perfect. We can give you a text to speech tool and it's going to work fine. Oh no, I can't listen to that. I can't do that.
Right.
So it really depends on the student and having that discussion. And this kind of leads into what Elizabeth was talking about. And one thing I'll mention is when you start college shopping, like this is the time when you start asking those questions. Uh, Mason, I'm very fortunate that we happen to have the resources and the support to be able to kind of broadly provide a number of different types of assistive technology tools for those students who may need it. That is not the case with every institution. The other thing that we have are staff members on my team who can support people who are learning how to use these tools for the first time. So if they need help installing them on the computer or troubleshooting issues, we have staff members that can help with doing those kinds of things. Not every institution offers that level of support. And so when you're shopping around at college, or if you've already selected a college and you know you're heading there, you need to find out what level of support you're actually going to be provided. The other
Mhm.
thing I'll talk about, we talked about learning services. Um, and our assistive technology is one thing in terms of providing the resource or the tool and maybe even offering some level of training, but the actual implementation may happen in another unit or with support from another unit. We were talking about note taking, organization, other
Such a
things
good point.
around,
Such a good point.
executive functioning. or you might get additional support. So it really depends on the institution that you have chosen to attend or that you're looking at attending. You really need to go out and ask those questions so that you know what level of support the student's going to receive.
And let's be clear too, George Mason University is a public university. I know a lot of people tell each other, oh, you got to send your kid to a private college because they're the ones that are going to provide the most support. You can't make assumptions like that. Every single school has to be researched individually. In the chat, I have put a form that I offer as a free download that you can use when you and your student explore the disability services at the colleges that they're interested in. It kind of provides you a place to, some questions you might want to ask and place to take some notes. But yeah, don't assume that because a school is public and schools are not getting a lot of funding that they're not going to have it. And in fact, some of my colleagues would say that a bigger school is more likely to have, assistive technology supports because there's so many students going there that they see a reason to provide that kind of robust support. So that's a great question. We had some questions about, I think it was, oh gosh, they're disappearing down this list. I'm having difficulty tracking. Something about, it was note-taking in math. What's assistive or maybe even completing math assignments? My apologies. If you want to try popping that back in here, it sort of disappeared on me.
One common tool that's been used in recent years is called Equatio.
Yep.
And we do have some faculty members that may be using tools like MathPix as well. MathPix is a tool where you can essentially capture the equation and actually embed it in a document in a more accessible format. Equatio is the same. It can actually essentially take a screen capture of an equation, whether it's written in a Word document or a PDF document or it's online, and then actually read it aloud to the student, convert it, and the student can actually handwrite equations and it will convert it into typewritten or digital math as well. So Equatio is a really good tool to kind of explore, and that's created by Text Help. So the folks who make Read and Write actually created it, or actually the ones who sell Equatio as well.
Right. Now, when it comes to note taking, obviously, if I'm recording my lecture using Glean, it's not going to capture the math problems, right? Do you find that students are allowed, because that's not part of what I do and my job, are they allowed to take pictures of the equations?
In most instances, it's rare that I've come across a faculty member that has a problem with a student taking a snapshot of the whiteboard after they've literally just went and worked through a really difficult question set during class. Students are encouraged to take screenshots. And I'll also mention that tools like MathPix and like Equatio, depending on the image or the quality of the image, can actually convert that into digital math as well. So after you've handwritten that equation and worked it out in class, you can take a picture, upload that into a Glean, copy and paste that into a document or something like that, and then use a tool to actually scan and capture it as digital.
So in answer to somebody's question, can they assume that colleges allow everybody to record? I would not ever make an assumption about that. But what you do need to know, because this is sort of alluded to, and again, let me just take this opportunity. This is my book, 7 Steps to College Success, which is backwards. I know I can't fix that right now, but look me up and you'll find the book. I did interview Corey, I think, for all of my books, at least the last 2. Colleges, professors cannot all by themselves decide that an accommodation that Disability Services has approved can't be used in their classroom. They don't always know that. They don't always tell students that that is the case. So there has to be a process at every college where if a professor has an objection, there is a review of that, and who's involved and what's involved will vary from college to college. But if your student is ever told by a professor, I know Disability Services approved that, but you can't have it, that student should, as soon as possible, contact their Disability Services coordinator, whatever that person is called, to say, Professor Hamblett said I couldn't record their classes, even though you said so, because then it's our job to follow up with the professor and start that process. But I just think it's bad form to record anybody without permission. And if you've been given permission for these students, they should be sure to let the school know, let disability services know. Corey, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I'll mention this. Typically, the students are provided, or even the faculty members are provided with some kind of faculty contact sheet or accommodation sheet. When the student registers with the Disability Services Office or Disability Support Services, the faculty members will usually get some kind of documentation saying these are the accommodations the students approved for, or the student may take that accommodation sheet. Usually they're tasked with taking that accommodation sheet to the faculty member. So it is good to always maintain communication with the support services
Yeah.
counselor or office or whatever, so that they can help to intervene in those difficult situations.
Yeah, and your student is not look, so we expect a lot of our students. They are considered adults at the college level, and so be aware that there are things they're going to have to do often, like notify their professors about their accommodations through various means. It depends on the system at the school, but they are not supposed to be in a position to negotiate their accommodations. If we
No.
have approved something and they have any problem, it really is our job to help them work that out. So they should not feel like it's their job to explain to the professor why they need it. If we've approved it, that's all the professor should need to know. But again, there might be a legitimate reason why something can't be used. So for instance, a colleague, when I was interviewing her for the book, said that in most college classes, not only can you have a calculator, you need a calculator. But if you are in an elementary education program, and part of the expectation is you will be able to solve calculations on the board in front of your students, you may not be able to use a calculator in some of your classes at college, because what they are looking to see is whether you can calculate. But again, that would be subject to review. Corey, somebody's asked if there's a fee associated with the learning specialist. So, well, let's start with this. At Massey, with this program for students with autism at GMU, is there a fee for that?
I believe so. Yes, there is I'm sorry, there is a fee for the Massey program. That's an additional level of support beyond just working with disability services, and that may include, I believe, that includes working with a learning specialist and a number of other different types of supports as well. That is, and it really depends. There are I can't tell you how many across the country are now, but there are certain institutions across the country that have been offering programs to support individuals who may be on the spectrum. So they're kind of additional levels of support. It may be support not only in housing and different things like that. It may be support with a different kind of other outside programs or extracurricular activities that the students may get involved with. It's support with learning and any kind of we talked about earlier, like note-taking, organization, task management, that kind of stuff. It's an additional level of support, and there's additional charge for that kind of stuff.
So be aware, folks, that colleges, just like they don't have to provide personal devices, don't have to provide personal services. And those come in a variety of flavors, if you will. But the way to understand it too is that if your student has worked at the high school level, like sat down every day with a special ed teacher, that kind of stuff is not typically available. And so if you are looking for that kind of support, you're probably looking for a paid program. The K&W Guide to Colleges has a list of those. And it's very long title. It's K&W Guide to Colleges for Students with Learning Differences, I think, but you can look that up. There's a list of the programs. Most of them are on the East Coast. There are 2 or 3 dozen of those, and they charge a fee. But there are some schools that offer access to a learning disability specialist. I'm not allowed to say where I work, but students get to see me for free. Once a week for a half an hour, or every other week for an hour. So again, I have put the download to the form that I offer on how to research disability services at different colleges. These are the kinds of things you can ask about. And also, ask questions, because colleges can call anybody they want an academic coach, an executive functioning specialist. So if it matters to you and to your student, more importantly, that that be somebody with a special ed background, ask a lot of questions, because it may not be, it doesn't mean those folks can't be really helpful, but especially if you're paying a program, you want to know. This is a great question, and we're going to wrap up soon, so get your questions in. Corey, what options do you suggest for a college course where only a physical textbook is available and there's no digital format? I go for it.
So yeah, typically when we are in that situation, um, I'm going to say most, if not all. Again, it's the responsibility of the institution to ensure the student has the textbook in an accessible format. And so students, for example, at Mason, they will register with Disability Services. If there's only a physical textbook and it needs to be converted into a digital format, they are referred to our office. We will convert that textbook into a format that works for them. So it may be that it's a PDF, accessible PDF, or accessible Word document. Um, and what we do is we reach out to those students who are referred for accessible text at the beginning of the semester, say, hey, get your textbook requests in,
Mm,
and then we will go ahead and through the process of converting textbooks into an accessible format. Now that's very important that we actually actively outreach to we reach out to the students rather a few weeks before the semester starts, usually about a month before the semester starts, or around the time they start registering for the next semester of classes.
right, right,
A
right,
lot of students will wait till the first day and then show up and say, hey, I need this 1,000-page textbook converted into a PDF for
right,
me, accessible PDF.
right,
Now I keep emphasizing accessible because it's one thing to scan 1,000 pages and just give you an electronic document. It's another thing to scan 1,000 pages and then manually go through every page and add structure so that you have headings in there. You can create bookmarks and things like that. So if it's a student who's a screen reader user and they need a significant level of markup, that takes a significant amount of time and man hours.
mm,
We will do all of that, but it's really important for students to make those requests as early as possible. And
right.
not every institution is tasked with staff to do that. So, a disability services office may have to outsource that. So that's a discussion or a question to ask as well.
And also, they're not gonna stay up overnight because your student waited to
Sure.
ask for things. So, again, we come back to the responsibilities of your student and what they're expected to do.
Hmm.
I see OCR, Office for Civil Rights, decisions where a student has complained that they didn't get their books in time, and then when OCR investigates and finds they didn't request the books until halfway through the term, they close the, again, this is not legal or medical advice, but my memory is they often just close the case and don't find that the school was at fault, because it is the student's responsibility. We haven't really talked about tools for writing, so I want to jump to that one before we close up. So how are you accommodating students who have difficulty literally, physically writing, or difficulty getting their ideas out? What kinds of options are there for that?
The most common tool is Dragon Naturally Speaking. Most everybody who comes in needing any kind of writing support is always asking for something voice recognition, speech recognition. And if it's not something like the Dragon Anywhere app that's built into that is an app that you can get on iOS or Android. If it's not something like that, then they may be looking for a desktop solution. And while we may start with Elizabeth alluded to this earlier, which is the dictate option, which is available in, let's say, Microsoft Word, or you can get that available in like Google Docs or something like that. You'll find, or even what's built into the operating system. Word has iOS, or Mac OS has voice control. Um, Windows has voice speech recognition. Both the Windows and Mac versions are much better than they were in previous. On Windows 11, you have increased functionality, and with Mac, the latest version, I can't remember what it's called now, Cantina or something. I can't remember, but but that has increased functionality as well. You are still limited in that they are not customized voice profiles, meaning anybody can show up. I can show up and use the computer, same voice profile that Elizabeth would have access to. Dragon Naturally Speaking customizes the voice profile over time based on how you speak, how you enunciate certain things. And that's why you have a better experience with that over time than you do just kind of using um, just kind of that one rote voice profile that everybody has access to in the operating system. That's the
And
most
that's
common thing.
right. And that's another one that, again, the permission, well, actually, you wouldn't, so let's be clear about something else too. When it comes to in-class activities, which includes note taking, which also includes taking tests,
Mhm.
the school has to provide whatever technology the student needs because you're in the classroom, you're in the testing setting. But when it comes to stuff that you use outside to write your papers, to do the reading, for reading, we have to provide the text. But when it comes to writing, schools don't have to provide any technology for that. So students are on their own to figure out what tools they need unless they have access to somebody like Corey's group. So just
I
trying to,
will mention one other
yeah.
bucket as it relates to writing. There are some students who fall in the bucket of needing like word prediction tools. So
Oh,
like a
great.
word
Word
queue
prediction.
or a text helps read and write. Those have some
Mhm.
word prediction built into them. That's can be very user friendly for some folks.
Okay.
That is not as common, but the two buckets that I've seen most commonly over the last say decade or so have been like word prediction or using voice recognition as it relates to
Mhm.
writing supports.
Yeah, I'm gonna comment here. I'm seeing some comments saying that schools often pay note takers or relying heavily on other classmates. That is not what I am seeing in our community. Corey?
That is happening sometimes. There are some
Right.
institutions that will pay for note takers. For example, at Mason, we do not pay note takers.
Hmm.
The challenge that you have with note takers is that they are students as well. So the reliability of the notes is based on what they see and what they think is important
That's so
when they're taking
important.
notes. What your student may see as valuable in the lesson, that information that may not be in the notes. And so sometimes the difficulty is actually getting students to take notes. The
That is
students
all
who are
those
the note takers
problems,
may not always show up to take
right?
notes too. So there are a lot of issues with trying to get human note takers at the end of the
Yeah, and that's why there are a combination of reasons I'm seeing in my community of disability services folks discussing why they are moving away from human note takers. And so what's really important is if your kids are still in high school, if somebody is providing them notes and they're not expected to take any, it's probably a much better idea for them to have somebody teach them how to start to take notes, abbreviate, figure out key phrases, take down what's on the board, because even if they get a human note taker at college, as Corey said, it's hard to get them sometimes. Schools don't often pay them. If your note taker is sick, to get disability services will not run around looking for somebody else in your class to get those notes. And most importantly, as Corey said, every student comes to class with a different background of knowledge about any particular topic. And so if I walked into a biology class, I'd have to take down almost every word because I don't know anything about biology. And my student note taker might be somebody who's very good at biology and only takes down a couple of key concepts. The school's not going to turn around to my note taker and say, you have to take more notes for Elizabeth. We just don't tweak things that much. So be aware that human note takers can be a great tool, but it is a very good idea. And in fact, some schools are very clear with students they should be taking their own notes. The intention of a note taker, the intention of recording is to fill in the gaps in a student's notes.
And that's one of the reasons that a lot of institutions have started to invest in tools like Glean,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Otter.ai, is
yeah.
because they don't want to have to deal with human note takers or pay
Right.
human note takers.
So there's some other questions here, but I think we're probably going to cut it here. Is it okay? Can people reach out to you with some questions?
Yeah, by
Or
all means,
okay.
please. Yeah, you can give
So
my
what's the
contact
best way
information.
for them to reach you?
They can email me at ksinglet, that's KSINGLET at gmu.edu. Ksinglet@gmu.edu. Feel free to
Um,
email me. I'd be happy to follow up.
so yeah, because we saw some questions about if students are being homeschooled, how do they get access to this stuff? So
Mhm.
folks, don't inundate him, ask him some simple questions, but also join Joan's Facebook group, which I've dropped into the chat here. There's an opportunity to do that. Follow Brian Friedlander, who's previewing some of these tools.
And we
And
get questions all the time, so feel free to reach
do
out.
you? Oh,
It's
that's
not a problem at
wonderful.
all.
and explore what's in the tools that your students already have. That may be the most comfortable thing for them because they won't have to feel again like they stand out. So
Mhm.
Corey, thank you so much. It was so lovely of you to take the time.
No
Again,
problem.
for those of you who are just learning about school, it's going to be backwards. My apologies. This is my book. I've interviewed Corey and a lot of other people. This will teach you all about the laws and accommodations and why some of these supports aren't available to your students. Give you some ideas for how to get your students the skills they need. Thank you all for joining. We have had a great turnout tonight and great questions. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I will try to get some of these resources into the notes. All right, everybody, thanks so much.
Thank you guys. Have a good evening.